and welcome back to the Catholic Drive Time Show. This is your host, Adrian Fonseca. It's so good to be on with you today. Good morning to you. I hope you're having a blessed Tuesday morning. It's always good to be here on Catholic Radio. Joining us right now is Bill Donohue, a courageous advocate for the Catholic faith, and he's the president and CEO of the Catholic League for Religious and Civil Rights, the largest Catholic civil rights organization in the United States.
How you doing? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you on. And there is a very interesting situation. We were just talking about the virtues of fatherhood, and your book, War on Virtues, you kind of touch on this kind of issue as well, but really going on to the throat of it and saying the virtues of America as a whole. So let's start from the beginning and say, what is the virtues of America and how are we not living up to those virtues now?
Well, we did at one time, but I think the ruling class today is undermining them. I looked at why people are a success in measured by economic success and academic success. And I looked at various demographic groups as well as individuals. And it was my determination that if you employ self-discipline, if you exercise perseverance and personal responsibility, you are likely to be a success. In fact, I make the argument that you can't be a success unless you employ what I call the vital virtues. This would be true of athletes. It would be true of doctors and lawyers, business people. It wouldn't make any difference. But our society today is not nurturing these virtues. If anything, the ruling class is undermining them.
Now, it's interesting because you also talk about in your book the American dream, and this kind of idea of the American dream is almost so ethereal nowadays that I struggle to even define what we mean when we say the American dream. Is it a white picket fence in a small house in a 2-car garage? What do we mean when we say the American dream?
Well, James Adams Truslow was the one who coined it in a book about over 100 years ago. And what he meant by that was, yes, the idea of living free and doing well materially in America. But he also said there was a spiritual dimension to it. So it was more than just a depository of economic well-being. But clearly, most Americans do aspire to it. And if you look at Hispanics and African Americans and Muslims, for example, to take three groups who are often somewhat on the margin, they aspire to the American dream as much as anybody. So the idea is alive. We're being taught to hate America in the schools from kindergarten through graduate school. And so that's why a lot of people don't feel patriotic. It was striking to me. We're coming up to the 4th of July. I want to write about a piece about this for the Catholic League. The people who are the most patriotic in our society are the people in the lower income bracket. In other words, the poorest people in our society are the most patriotic. Who would be the least patriotic? The ones who are the most well-off, basically white, well-educated people. So we have a real problem there. I would like to see a national community service because too many of our kids from the Midwest and the South are bearing the brunt of going into the armed forces, protecting this country. And a lot of the kids who go to the elite schools, they do absolutely nothing but whine.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's so true. And it's funny because we talk about people in other countries like, oh, we're so mean to them, yet everyone's coming here for the American dream. No, we're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue with the War on Virtue with Bill Donohue after this. This is the assault on the fundamental virtues that shape the American dream. Good morning to you, Mr. Donohue.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's very interesting to me, this idea of war on virtue. So let's talk about this. Who is it that is assaulting the fundamental virtues of America, and how are they doing so?
Well, it's the ruling class, and by that I mean the elites, the decision makers in our major institutions. It used to be that you found this kind of a left-wing or woke politics in the arts and education, in the media, the entertainment industry, and amongst activist legal organizations. Today, it's infected the healthcare industry, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I didn't say the military, men and women. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, the ones at the top, they no longer accept the more patriotic understanding of America. I'm not sure what side they're on anymore. They're gone into the trans thing so big, you kind of wonder who's running what. And then let's not forget about the corporate 500. They're the ones who are promoting this whole idea that a man can become a woman can be a man, all this kind of madness. So we have a real problem. Now, how are they doing it? Well, just to give you one quick example. In terms of the family, which is the most important social cell or unit in society, that's why Jews and Mormons do so well, and Nigerians and Asians. Those are the four groups that I pick out have done the best in this country. They come from intact families for the most part. And the ruling class would have us believe that there is no such thing as a blue chip family. They teach in the schools that the nuclear family, if anything, should be trashed. And Black Lives Matter said that we should destroy it. And they were funded by the corporation. So instead of celebrating and using as a model the nuclear family, the father, the mother, I didn't say two parents, said the father and the mother and the children.
Amen.
We, instead of celebrating it, we're denigrating it.
Now, there are a number of things that I wanted to follow up on there. You brought up a lot of really good points I wanted to ask about, but I'm just going to try to grab just one of those things. Let's talk real quick about what you just said there about fathers and mothers, because they have very effectively, the ruling class has very effectively destroyed fatherhood. It's really hard to rip a child from their mother. They've done a good job with abortion, but it's very difficult, generally speaking, to take a child from their mother. But they were able to very easily take the child from their father. So tell me about the role of fatherhood in regards to the virtues of America.
Well, there's been a war on fatherhood, as I heard you fellas talking about just before I came on. The idea of trashing masculinity, which works against women, by the way, it works against women's rights when you denigrate the men. But yeah, there's so many different examples of what we're doing in our society. Everything is geared toward the girls. Now, I happen to have two girls, and I'm glad that we're giving them an equal mantle. But we're not really giving them an equal mantle so much as we are just dumbing down everything on the part of the men. And boys need fathers. And in my book, I talk about the group that suffers the most from the ruling class by undermining the family would be African Americans. I regard, this is the central argument in the book, that the white, well-educated, wealthy people who run this country are the biggest racist in America today. They are the ones who claim to be on the side of blacks, but they're always working to undermine African Americans. And it was Barack Obama the other day was historically and sociologically wrong when he came out and he said that the problems blacks have today is because of racism and discrimination. If that were the case, how could he explain the success of the Nigerians, which I just mentioned? What about Asians who were mistreated in this country, internment camps, people of color? What happened to blacks in this country, the worst thing happened, it was in the 1960s when the welfare state created dependency and gave an invitation for the father to abandon the family so the mother and the kids would get more money. So there's a lot of lies being told about what's going on. It's the white liberal group, which claims to be the most tolerant and virtuous. Look out. Black people don't need to worry about the Proud Boys. They need to worry about the white boys who are on their side, because they're the ones who are actually punishing them.
No, that's a really good point, and I think that's often lost in our time. Now, the question, though, then becomes, how do we get back? Because this becomes very discouraging. Someone might say, okay, well, if all the elites are against us, then I guess we are in this current situation. So now we need these entitlement programs because now we've had these people who are now dependent upon them. So how do we get back without completely destroying people's lives? And I have a couple, I'll leave that there. I have like a dozen other questions for you, but I'll leave that there to start off with.
Well, first of all, we have to get over this mesmerization of the elites and that they have alphabets after their name like Esquire, MA, PhD. Let me tell you, a lot of these people are dysfunctional. They're the most likely to believe that a man can become a woman and vice versa. So I'm not saying we should be cynical, but we should be very, very skeptical. As I often say, if you hear something from the elites which strikes you in your gut as being wrong, trust your gut. We were lied to by the elites about COVID and so many other things. Now, look, there are some good things that are happening. The elites are being told what to do. We just played here at the Catholic League a major role in what happened with the Dodgers over the weekend. We had a 5-week relentless campaign we were the ones who got them disinvited. And then, of course, the LGBT people got them reinvited. But in the end, we wanted to drive down the numbers at the game, and we did so. We put out a documentary on Disney earlier in the year, and we wanted to drive down their numbers. They're in trouble with the stock market as well. Look what happened to Bud Light. Look what happened to Target. Now, these are decisions made by the elite. The elite at Major League Baseball, Disney, Target, and Bud Light. But the people from below, power to the people, they really don't believe in that. That was the slogan of the 60s. I believe in power to the people because I don't trust the elites. So and you can see with the moms, with the school boards of what's going on. So there are some encouraging signs. And as I like to say, that winning can be contagious, just like losing. We've been on the losing side for too long. I like what's going on now.
That's wonderful. I'm glad you brought that up because I've just recently been talking to a number of people who have been saying things like, it's all the major corporations, it's all the money, it's all the government officials. How can we do anything to try to combat it? And so maybe we should just bury our heads in the sand and work on ourselves, become virtuous ourselves, but then just kind of abandon the public sphere completely. And you're saying absolutely not. So what would you say to the average American? How can we get involved in the fight?
Well, they should start by rejecting the ideas of people like Paul Ryan, who sits on the board of directors of Fox News, who came out last week and said that the culture doesn't matter. He doesn't want to be involved in culture warrior issues. Let's just worry about the debt crisis. We are in a state of close to being a state of moral anarchy in this country. Again, you have to trust your gut. You have to organize. You can see what's happening in other places. You don't need, some George Washington leader every single time. You can look to certain organizations, to certain inspiration. But you can vote with your pocketbook. You get involved in demonstrations. You can quietly, nicely say things at work to your boss. Say, listen, can we sit down and talk about this? I'm not asking people to become martyrs and get fired, but I do think that you can go with other people at work. You get 2 or 3, 4 or 5 people and say, can we sit down at brown bag lunch and describe your concern about forcing people to put on rainbow pins and stuff like that. So I think people can become more active. And as I say, winning can be contagious.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I think that's very encouraging. It is very encouraging, honestly, to see and witness all these, like you said, these victories. And it does become very encouraging. Now, in the little time we have left, I want to skip over and talk a little bit about education for a second. And this was very interesting to me. You had a little section in your book about education, and it reminded me of something that I had read from a Dominican friar that was alive in the 20th century. And he spoke about the fact that the teaching logic to people, because it used to be that children would learn logic in grammar school, and that when you learn logic is the poor man's defense against the elites, because then if you have the principle of reason, then you can see if someone is throwing some craziness at you, you can be able to see through it and say, that doesn't make sense. That contradicts my common sense. That contradicts my Catholic sense, and reject it. And so what have you seen against the war against our education system?
Well, unfortunately, look, I spent 20 years in education, 16 as a professor. I've taught every grade from the second grade to newly minted PhDs from around the world. Too many of the people in the classroom are themselves profoundly illogical. And so if you want to learn about logic, you have to repair to some of the great works in the Catholic literature. Quite frankly, some of the most dysfunctional people I've ever met in my entire life are in the professoriate. So I think that's where the problem is. It's always been the problem with those people. They are militant secularists. That's what their religion is. But yes, you're absolutely right. The logic does matter. Yet we're teaching in the schools that logic doesn't matter. That hard work is a white man's kind of thing. So that you teach that to black kids, for example, that you're acting white if you do well in school. See, there's an example of the racism of the white people again, because the Ku Klux Klan has to be cheering every time the white liberals come out and tell people that the nuclear family doesn't work and the like. Look, there is an answer to education. Very quickly, let me just mention one aspect, and there are many. Homework. Homework matters. Who does the most homework of any demographic group in America? Asians. And they're at the top academically, and that's why they're so successful. We discriminate against them in the schools, including Harvard and Yale. The Supreme Court will realize that issue this week. African Americans do the least amount of homework. This is not a racial issue, it's a class issue. That's because 70% of the black kids come from one-parent families. I worked with black kids a good part of my life in Spanish Harlem, and as a professor, as the faculty advisor to the basketball team, I worked with blacks in and out of the classroom. They can learn like anybody else. But you have to keep the bar high and demand of them. White liberals are racist. They don't regard black people be equal, which is why they keep dumbing down the bar. They won't admit to it, so I'll just speak the truth for them.
Amen. And the last question, we're just about out of time. Where can people find more information, get connected with you, get your book, that information?
Sure. They can go to CatholicLeague.org, www.CatholicLeague.org, one word. The book is available through our website. You can get it through Amazon. You can get it through Sophia Institute Press, Barnes & Noble's, wherever books are sold. War on Virtue.
Amen. War on Virtue. Thank you very much, Mr. Donohue. We'll have to have you back. I think that was a great message and something that many people needed to hear. It's very encouraging. But God bless you. God love you, and have a blessed day.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on with you, Adrian.
Absolutely.